Magic, battles, adventure. Lilith's journey is filled with the unknown and danger. If you love the feeling of your heart racing, join her and soar through the storm of magic. Chapter 23. Lilith, do they really turn graduates into golems? The quiet question had my panting self sitting up sharply, having just finished my spearmanship recovery class, and just been lying in the grass. I had heard that the Seven Kingdoms were a place of hopes and dreams, a place where you can do everything you've ever wanted. You've been thinking about what I said earlier? I asked with a wince, my issue with not biting my tongue getting worse. Sighing, I scratched the back of my head, and decided I'd tell her what I thought of it all. Truth is subjective, so even if it was mine, that doesn't mean it would be hers. Well, okay, I really shouldn't be the one to tell you this, because I am biased, but you can be whatever you want. As long as your standing supports it. I've only had my standing for about 3.5 months now, but because one thing was a little more different from the rest I've been living through blazon'. I'm not made to do the stuff I'm being forced to do. I'm not sure how many times I end up in the medical wing goes to show just how I'm not cut out for this. But I can't do anything else. I'm a rogue. I'm a war class, I don't have any other options. It's war or slums because no one would hire one of war for anything else. I'm here to protect others, but I was not given the choice. I'd much rather be a merchant like my father. I'm actually really good at business and money, but yeah. I had wanted to be a healer. I fell to the grass, the thought still appealing but useless. You can be whatever you want to be. As long as you pick from the options you're given, and war class, though glorious, only has 3. Soldier, mercenary, or slums. Looking at her from my spot in the grass, I found her face twisted in both pity and disappointment. I wouldn't have been shocked if she'd started to cry with a few more words. But I pulled her down to stare at the stars with me. That doesn't mean you can't be different. I'm as different as one gets. I've got the magic of an aid, a class for war, and a type. Well, leads can be anything as long as they are at the top, I suppose. And yeah, I'm better at business and I'd much rather be a healer, and sure, I've suffered to the point I don't cry at the breaking of a bone, or even blink at being stabbed through. Clearing my throat, I corrected the path my words were taking, getting to the point. Despite it all, I'm good at using my head. I don't need to be the picture-perfect war lead when I can be something no one has ever seen before. I'm different, and I hate that, I really do, but that doesn't mean I can't use it. My magic, though weak, is easy to use and my mana great. I can't hit hard, but I can hit plenty. I'm not skilled, but I am fast enough to get away with it, and well, no one ever said you can't compensate with other means. I grinned, pulling a potion from my bag laying right beside me to raise it. The stars lighting up the vibrate purple beautifully. I'm different, I'm weak, but I'll be damned if that'll stop me. You're good at this cheering up thing, she said softly, you know. I'm different from my tribe as well. We aren't a race very proficient in magic, we're supposed to be big and strong. I'm not. I'm short and I'm weak and I've never been any good with a sword. I glanced at her at that. She was small. She's like 6.5 feet tall. But magic, well, everyone was poor at it. I've always been good at it. Then I got here, my first day. The uniform wasn't for one such as myself. The person I thought to be untouchable was beaten so severely I threw up twice. The meals weren't even meals, and everyone was so much better than me. Even with magic. The one thing I thought myself good at. People stared and pointed, but with one look at who I was with, no one approached, which I'm not sure was a bad thing. You and your people. I was told you'd be welcoming, but you weren't. You were all rude and brash and selfish. Sitting up, I put my arm on my knee and looked back at her with a grin. That's right, we are rude, brash, and selfish. I'm the weakest around, but no one bothers me. The uniforms aren't suited for those with a tail or claws such as yours. The food they serve isn't even food. And we are all very unwelcoming. I agreed. You want to know what I do when I've got complaints, which I've got a lot of? I asked, getting to my feet and offering her my hand. my other planting on my hip. I sought them. Can I fix these myself? Can I fix these with help? And do these need to be fixed? If I can fix them myself, I make a plan to do so. If I need help, I ask, and if they are things that I can't or don't need to be fixed, I do my favorite thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you shouldn't complain, because there's no harm in it, and it can help. But if you're going to complain, you've got to think of a solution while you do so. Your favorite thing? She asked, taking my hand, pulling the heavy girl to her feet with a waver to my grin. A bright blue light glowing around us. I began to laugh. I fly, the dragon roared from above us. Chapter 24. You bonding well, makes me feel left out, Adrian called, walking into my room and already picking up whatever interested him today. His room wasn't all that far away from mine. All the cool kids grouped together in the old building. You could come to class more often, I hummed, not looking up from the trousers I was sewing. What? Why would I do that? Seems like a bother. You're lucky you see me in magic. You do not want to see me in your practical classes. He snorted, stepping over the broken glass I had mostly cleared up to drop on my bed next to me. Aranori was absorbed in the book I lent her at my desk. You're going to get kicked out of school, I stated, tearing the thread with my teeth. That'll happen whether or not I show up, he hummed, picking up one of the legs with a raised brow. These are too long to be yours. What are you doing? Uniforms are strict and they don't make them for Ari's build. He looked at her before looking back. Build? I shot him a look. Oh, that wasn't an insult. It's just surprising you didn't blatantly ridicule the school. I do that a lot, because I'm right, but I do know where to cross the line. And I already wrote to the dean about their lack of consideration, but with far harsher words. I haven't gotten a response, but he did look away the last time our eyes met, so I'm going to say he's working on it. But until then, I can't in good conscience let her get reprimanded for something that isn't her fault. He watched me suspiciously, making me stick my tongue out at him. Plus, I actually like this design and already did mine, so there's no going back, and the more people with it the less likely I'll get in trouble. I smirked, thrusting my leg out from under my blanket, and showing off the ankle that had a ribbon running through it and keeping it tight. Oh, you little rebel you, he chuckled. Well, I don't see why I can't do it too. Let's start a trend. Do you have another needle? Nodding at the box, he opened it and dug through. Our sewing soon fell into silence. Why is he pantsless? Glancing up, a new addition joining us. Fashion, we said together, going back to our sewing at the sight of who it was. You should at least shut the door if you're going to be heathens. He doesn't mind, do you? Not at all, do you? Don't see why I would. You nobles, try acting a little more like it. Alex sighed, glancing at the still silent Ari before joining us on the bed. What? Noble? Oh no, I'm a noble's bastard. I get to be a heathen. Adrian smirked, properly using the thread scissors I had. Most wouldn't flaunt that, I hummed, finishing the buttons for the tail flap. And most wouldn't get the council head to avert his gaze with nothing more than a letter. Is that going to become a thing? I sighed. She did what? Alex asked, startled. She wrote the dean a complaint letter about the lack of consideration within the school uniform, and he won't meet her gaze anymore. He snickered, running the black ribbon through the now tightened ankle of his trousers. So it is a thing, what? Seriously? Stars, what did you write? They both looked at me while I silently buttoned the finished tailpiece. Nothing much, just told him that it'd be best that he was a little more accommodating to all species that attend Dragon Valley now, and even in the future, if he truly wished the best for the school. I hummed, putting away the needles I had been using and closing my sewing box. Oh my stars, you threatened an elite. The elite? A council member. The council head. I looked at him flatly and he cleared his throat. You threatened the dean. No, Alex, I would never do something so reckless and easily traceable. I whispered the last part, making Adrian laugh, but before Alex could ask any more questions, I opened my mouth again. Ari, I'm done. She jumped at her new nickname, and looked over only to do a double take upon finding the two that hadn't been here before. Try it on and tell me what you think, all right? I'll be right back. She looked between the two carefully before taking it and slowly backing out of my room. Were her pants the only thing giving her trouble? Adrian asked, uncaring for the topic change. Yeah, other than her elevated ankle and tail, her body's not that different from ours, though she does say it's a little weird to have something touching her spines. I shrugged, leaning back on my arms and looked at them. Do you think it'd be insensitive of me to ask if scales stretch like skin when it comes to fat? Alex hit him upside the head quite hard. They don't, I asked, and she said despite how it looks she doesn't have scales, just thick skin. And scuts, which are apparently just bony horn things. I answered, getting up and putting the box in the chest at the door to my bed. So stretch marks. That's what she told me. Interesting. No. It's insensitive, and not something you should ask about. We both looked at him, disbelieving he was the one to be bothered by this. Oh, you just because I'm an orc you think it's normal to talk about this? I lived in a mixed community. Mixed? Apparently one that shamed body types. Alex opened his mouth to snap at Adrian, but I was already talking. It's not insensitive to be curious about others, especially new races. She asked similar questions, and I see where you're coming from, but it's only insensitive if you phrase it wrong. I shut the both of them down by taking both sides. Their beauty standards are really interesting, just so you know. How so? Alex glared this time at the new shift in conversation. Long tails, polished and smooth scales, strong tall horns, powerful jaws, magic, wings in general, but the wider the better. And interestingly enough, elf ears. Oh, and hair. She said they thought it was the pinnacle of beauty to have hair. She's got a lot of headdresses to give the impression of hair. I counted on my fingers, having had a very interesting conversation about beauty. I was looking forward to one of fashion. Elf ears? Or pointed in general? Alex asked, getting distracted despite not wanting to. She said the longer the ears the better, and elves have the longest I know of. I shrugged, Adrian pulling on his downward slanted ears in curiosity. Up or down? I don't know, that is actually really interesting. I know, she walked back in, looking very pleased, comfortable. Yes, I thought it would be tight, but I can move without being restricted, thank you. Of course, anyone bothers you, drop my name and I'll take care of it. You sound like you're going to murder anyone that bothers her. Which you aren't allowed to do, glancing at Alex, the implication that I would mildly insulting. I'm not going to kill anyone, I'm not an idiot, plus, there are worse things you can do to someone than kill them. Chapter 25 again. That freaking creeper. Oh, that dude that was talking to the dean. Adrian rested his chin on my head, his hands in his pockets, while Alex paused in his conversation with Ari to glance at us. Who? She asked while I narrowed my eyes at him. Just some random person Lilith thinks is suspicious, also thinks he'll affect her schedule soon. Not a random person, the only other rogue anyway near the school, who, apparently, was given a teacher uniform, and is wearing wrong. I corrected, shooting a glare at him while he rolled his eyes. And you know he's a rogue how? Easy, the way he carries himself, the weapons he clearly has on his person, the real reason. I may have stolen his standing card, Lilith. Alex snapped, making me sigh and roll my eyes. Standing card? Ari asked, so, gladly taking the way out of a scolding I moved to explain. I'm sure they gave you one before you entered, but it's the little black card you have to carry around. Think of it as an identification card. The first one you are given is like your school ID. Pulling mine from my bag, I showed it to her. These are more advanced than the standard type that just tells you magic type and rank. All you needed to get it to work would be a drop of blood. In the red circle. It is the red circle. The blood stays and takes the shape of a perfect circle. No one really knows why, but it also stays red so. Oh, but I bet Alex's would be green and Adrian's. I stared at him while he raised a brow. I did not know what color his blood was. Anyway, it depends on your blood color for the color of the circle. Mine happens to be red, so it's red. You have your card, don't you? I think so. Oh my. She was going to have to carry it everywhere, or my gods, were there going to be consequences? Thankfully, she did pull one from her pocket. In a language I did not know. MK, well, I do know that is the color red. So, I know some of what's happening here. Is this your native tongue or? I trailed, getting steered away from one, rushing to get to a recovery class by Adrian's arm, which was dropped over my shoulders. It is? She said excitedly while I nodded, smiling and staring. I have no fucking clue what that says. Would it be rude if I said that? Should I just pretend I know? I mean, I can vaguely guess what it says. Woo, I've never seen anything like that. Adrian whistled from his resting place atop my head, his arm acting as a pillow between my hair and his cheek. Alex shot him a glare while he just raised a brow. I'm not shocked. Only those of my clan have been able to recognize it so far, she sighed, her tail sagging with her shoulders while her colors dulled. Well, now I have to make her feel better. Legally. What do you mean? I asked, swatting him off again, and popping up next to her, all of my friends being giants. It's obviously derived from both Layati and Vovian, though written a little different. It is still very beautiful. I hummed, staring at the tall loops and many dots. I'd be shocked if I was wrong. With the way she beamed, I'll have to say I'm not. Though, I haven't a clue how to read Vovian, most Vovian books having been destroyed, making learning it rather pointless. But it's easily designatable by the placement and frequency of the dots. The Vovian were more beast than person, after all. They hardly had thumbs. I smiled, misplacing her attention to avoid having to attempt to read whatever her standing card said. More beast than man? She asked, taking the bait while I tilted my head and grinned. Indeed, they were much like that of a werewolf on the night of a full moon. They were capable of standing on two legs, but rarely did so, as their arms were much too long and far too heavy to make such a thing comfortable, not to mention the shape of their spines. They came in different shapes and sizes, all deprived from different animals. It's said that the werewolf is actually a descendant of the Vovian, but this was disproved a few years back. I hummed, happy to share my knowledge. Though, it's believed that not all actually went extinct, and there is plenty of evidence to suggest that many beasts are actually closely related to them. What about the Dries? Adrian asked, putting his hands behind his ears to mimic their wide animalistic ears. What about the Vincer? Alex added, raising to his tiptoes and moving his sword sheath to look like a tail. Or the Mnaya, they said together, this time attempting to make claws in different ways. My brow twitching at the part one had just been about to explain, having been used to cut me off. Yes, as I was about to say, there are traces of them in a handful of different clans. The Dries have the ears of animals and flat rabbit-like noses, the Mnaya with their large arms and powerful claws, and no, the Vincer aren't related to the Vovian. Despite appearances, they are two completely different species, really. I could have sworn. Alex mumbled, thinking to himself, Ari looking at me with sparkling eyes at his question, expecting more detail. My distraction seeming to have worked on everyone. Whatever. Sighing, I began to explain. The Vincer and the Vovian coexisted with the Dries for a very long while. At a point they were considered the same but different. The Vovian were feral, the Vincer domestic, and the Dries civilized due to their appearance. Vovian intelligence was often debated, but because of their ability to easily communicate with those that they coexisted with had them classified between semi-intelligent and intelligent, their writing leaving them more towards intelligent. Unfortunately, they were later hunted to extinction by the Empire. The Vincer were also hunted and still are, but they know not to venture within the Empire's territory. Their consciousness has never been questioned, as they can, with limited difficulty, communicate. Yes, They stand on heightened ankles and have tails like the Vovian, but their muzzles are nearly non-existent, and they are not nearly as large. Their ears are on the side of their head like ours, and their thumbs are fully developed. They stand upright without difficulty. They are actually a lot like blinking at Ari. My head fell to the side. They were a lot like her, the difference being they were mammals and the length of their muzzles. Anyway, the Vincer and the Vovian are different in the same way a drow is from a high elf. You know about elves, do you? Adrian asked, throwing himself back onto me and wiggling his ears. Staring at them, a frown on my lips as his ears were not as low as the common drows would be, I decided that instead of commenting I simply pushed his face away from mine. Or an orc to a goblin, I rolled my eyes, dropping my arm as I couldn't pray him off. Fundamentally the same, but on a different scale. Glancing at his way of putting it, I licked my lips. No, they are different. It's a wolf to a fox. How many comparisons do you need? Roughly, I sighed as we finally rounded the corner to the library. Do you think I would fall into the same category as Vovi? Them, she asked, giving up on the name halfway through. That's a good question that I don't have an answer for. Your clan is not one I know of, nor are you a mammal, so I doubt I could give an accurate answer. Freezing. Her mood dropping a second time, I facepalmed while Adrian snorted and Alex was the next to attempt to cheer her up after a firm whack to the back of my head. Chapter 26. My fist froze as I paused staring at her door, the sound having been soft but unmistakable. She was crying. Frowning, I glanced at the end of the hall and sighed. She had lasted a whole week. I had thought she wouldn't break. Sighing as I put my forehead to the door, wishing nothing more than to leave her be, knowing just how hard it is, I worked up the heart to knock. Faltering before I could do it, I crossed my arms and started to softly pace in front of the door. I could lie, I was pretty good at that. I grew up with a brother, of course I was good at that, but was I good enough to fool a teacher? Would they even care? Was she willing to take recovery classes for the momentary relief? This is the worst. It's one thing to hear someone you don't know crying, but your friend. I can't just let her do that alone. Even I clung to a stranger I haven't seen since. It just helps. Huffing, I stopped and brought my arm up again. Okay, I can do this, don't let her cry alone. But what if she's embarrassed? What if crying is different for her? What if I cross a line? Oh, stars. What do I do? I can't just waste time thinking about it. I have to get to class too. What are you? Alex asked, rounding the corner, as I let out a breath of relief and dropped my arms to my knees. She's crying. I don't know what to do, I sighed, pulling my brows together and looking up at him. He paused in his approach for a second before nodding and stopping beside me. Knocking, he used his other hand to ruffle my hair. Ari, wanna get some breakfast before class? He hummed causal, but a little softer than usual. With a crash and loud pounding footsteps, the door was ripped open by a bright orange girl whose eyes didn't look much different. Okay, I get serious situation, but that's not fair. I cry for 5 minutes and my eyes are red for 3 days, or I look like I've been hit in the eye. She looks the same. Yeah, let's get food, she gave a weak smile, playing it off like nothing happened, opening my mouth to make sure she was okay. Alex ruffled my hair again, harder this time. Want us to wait while you get ready, or do you want us to meet you there? He smiled. She cleared her throat and leaned again her door frame, with a wee bit of difficulty. I'll see you there, she shrugged stiffly, very obviously not being herself. I think she maybe attempted to act like Adrian. Stars, she's bad at lying. My attention was diverting as the large boy steered me down the hall by quite literally picking me up, tucking me under his arm. He grabbed my bag just before it fell. Why are we leaving? What if she cries again? She didn't say she was all right. Lilith, if she had been the one to find you crying, how would you have felt if she did everything you were thinking of doing? Opening my mouth, I closed it and puffed up my cheeks as I gave a heavy exhale. No one likes it when someone walks in on them while they are crying. Especially when it's pointed out. I'm not saying you shouldn't ask how someone is, but it feels better when you're asked subtly, right? I guess. I tried, no memory coming to mind about a gentle asking. What's wrong? Hey, stop, tell me what's wrong. I can't fix anything if you don't tell me, dear. What are you doing? Is it nice when they ask in a softer tone? Isn't that kinda slow? You're making a face, do you have a question? He asked, looking down at me while I went to ask it but paused. Is that insensitive? I feel like that's insensitive. No question is a bad question. Isn't that slow? Being nice about it. Isn't it just faster to ask and answer? I asked, meeting his gaze. He stared for a long second, brows furrowing ever so slightly and lips pulling down. Okay, there is a bad question. It's not about speed, Lilith, it's about how should I explain this? Okay, let's say you can skim 4 books in a day, is it better than thoroughly reading through 2? What? No, what's the point of reading it if you're just gonna skim it? I said immediately, the thought ridiculous. That's how friendships work, it's better to thoroughly read through every situation, so you properly understand rather than breeze through it, do you get it? Humming to myself while I thought over his analogy, I slowly nodded. But, if you understand someone well enough and they respond best to be blunt. That was aimed at me, that was aimed at you. Wow, you have an off switch. Looking up, I found Adrian, shockingly, at the table. His sentence processing and leaving me to blink in surprise. You aren't even aware of it, are you? He raised his brows. I don't know what you're talking about, I said honestly as Alex adjusted me and put me back to my feet. With a hum, he went to get food, leaving me with Adrian, who gave a short disbelieving laugh. Serious? He asked in amazement, my brows pulling together as I looked him up and down. Wow, all right, well, I'm not going to say anything just in case it doesn't work if you're aware. What? Hold on, tell me what you mean. An off switch? I don't understand. Oh, it's definitely an off switch. Chapter 27, What are you doing? Jumping at the voice, I looked up horrified only to find Adrian. What are you doing? I let out a breath, holding my chest as my heart hammered. He looked me over slowly before crouching by what I was doing. Don't you have a key to the potions room? He asked carefully and gently picked up one of the potions I have been selling to the council. His gaze shifting to me sideways upon finding the seal I had quickly decided on. A new question playing in his eyes, but he didn't voice it. I do, and why are you here? I asked, snatching the potion and shoving the open sphere I was quick to close into the dragon's mouth. Which, having seen the look on his face, made me think that was even more suspicious. All right, well, I'm here because I happened to see you sneak off after dark, which is a thing you don't do because you will always prefer sleep to anything else, and figured it'd be fun to follow. Now, why are you here? He raised a brow, propping his elbow on his thigh and putting his cheek in hand. That's... I hesitated, this being something I hadn't planned to share. Or do. I was supposed to let it go. But stars, was it an interesting concept? Amplifying mana. That was unheard of, and even if it was at a dangerous level I could tweak it. I could tweak it and sell it, or just keep it because I need everything I can use to keep up. And what if I could do more than just mana? What if I could increase stamina, or strength, or speed, or anything else? Imagine that. I could actually keep up with these monsters if I could do that. Something I shouldn't be. I wavered before my shoulder slumped and I sighed. I really shouldn't be doing this. Yeah. I figured as much, and aren't these those potions the council's been shipping off all week? Why do you know that? Why do you have them? We stared at one another for a long moment. He just sat there, a smile in place, and brows raised while I watched him cautiously. Why did he know that? Why do you even have a key to the potions room? Why is your magic what it is? How did you get past my shield? Why are you so good at blood magic? Why do you use spells I've never seen? Why do you have a dragon? Why does the fire elite hate you? Why does the earth elite watch you so often? Why did a rogue teacher show up? Why do you always notice him? Why does he always watch you? Why do you get singled out in 80% of your physical classes? Why are you ignored so completely in your practical classes? Why do you know so much about different races, their relations, and their origins? Why do you have books in dead languages? How do you know how to read them? Why is your empathy so lacking? Why do you not understand very common things, but know things others hadn't so much as heard of? Why do you? All right, I got it, you have a lot of questions about me. I cut him off while he just hummed and tilted his head, a pleasant smile in place. I'll answer one, maybe two, if you answer mine first. Why do you know that? He stared at me for a second before his hand found my hair and he ruffled it. I've already said it, but your magic, your business, though, I'll just extend that, yeah. Your business is your business. You answer whatever you want whenever you want and I'll do the same. I also brought you a book, actually, because I do have a lot of questions, but it's not my business, he said, pulling a black journal from his bag. Okay, so you're not going to answer that. I call it the question book. He shook it gently while I stared at it before slowly taking it. True to its name, it was utterly full of questions, one after another, with space for an answer below. It even had an index. Why's my name on the front? And why in gold? Future reference, in case you make one for me or Alex or Ari or anyone else, he hummed, not being any less suspicious. Do you do this a lot? See, so many questions. No, but really, is this going to become a thing? I wonder. Chapter 28. Because there's no line through word option, I did underline a crossed out word instead. What is this? Ari asked, pulling something from my bag while I laid on my bed, hardly keeping my eyes open, but studying, nonetheless. Glancing at her, I found the question book Adrian gave. I gave a grunt and looking back at my notes, which were propped by a full green arm. Is this a normal custom? Should I not have voiced my previous questions? No, it's not a normal custom, I sighed, rubbing my eyes and sitting up, deciding to take a break I knew to be much needed. It's fine to ask me things, that's just a book Adrian gave me full of questions he has about me. About you? Yeah, he's not usually one to ask them, but he has them, so I guess he gave it to me just to let me know he had them or something. I grumbled, getting to my dresser and slapping my face with water, the large saucer I recently brought for this very reason. May I take part in this? Stars, this was going to become a thing. Sure, whatever, there's an index, so check if it's already in there, or don't. I don't really care, I mumbled, wiping my face free of the water. I need to sleep, or I won't be able to keep up tomorrow. Or get sick. Gods, the recovery classes would be enough to kill me. With a few deep breaths and a shake of the head, I slapped my cheeks and went back to reading. Ari flipping through the neat and organized journal with a quill at the ready. Alex passed out on the majority of my bed, but given that his roommate supposedly had a habit of being loud, I didn't blame him. And he was more comfortable than the bed. I had a war crime exam tomorrow, and I had a sneaking suspicion that they didn't teach nearly a tenth of what was going to be on the exam. Which I only say because of the last 4 I flunked for that very fact. You had to get information for yourself. Resourcefulness. When they don't teach the curriculum properly on purpose, so those that think they have personal time fail. With a salty sigh, I rubbed my heavy eyes and tried to put the words together. Executioners, i.e. Spirit mergers are not permitted on the battlefield except as a punishment for breaking B-class war crimes and above. Under no circumstances are they to be left completely physically capable. At least one of the 5 senses is to be removed. Permanent action recommended required. Merging magic is to be restricted outside of giving punishment. As of the year 1011, all executioners are to be held in crime coliseums as corporal punishment, or to be properly monitored under the pretense of capturing criminals. For further detail, check page 1295. Pausing, I reread that. Loose clauses not something that typically came with a war crime. They just write them off somewhere else, not usually within war crimes. Tapping the side of the book, I leaned back on the warm boy practically unconscious, and just as my mind began to wander, a large hammer was quick to slam into my temple. With a groan, I rubbed my forehead and finally gave it. I had to sleep. If I fail, I fail. Closing my book, I pushed it onto the trunk on the foot of my bed, a large glass lizard taking most of the room on my floor despite the hanging cloth it laid in. Lock the door when you leave, I yawned, curling into Alex's side under the blanket. Ostcha bravo UWB, she hummed with a roll of her tongue, wishing me good night. Ostcha bravo UWB, IUHSIB DVUO, I sleepily called back. IUHSIB DVUO, Acuo, she absent-mindedly responded, the endearing words becoming more and more common between us. Burrowing into Alex, I hid from her candlelight and quickly found myself falling into the comfortable darkness I missed dearly. Chapter 29. Rise and Shine Freak Show Tilda was the only thing I heard before my door was quite literally kicked in and my dragon both pepper-sprayed and netted. Wow, 3 of them Tilda, glaring at them I scowled from under my blanket. Alex's jumping having been what actually woke me while Ari jolted from the desk she probably didn't mean to fall asleep on. I was forcefully pulled into a sitting position before cold water was splashed in my face. The other 2 getting very similar treatment by those I doubt they hated nearly as much as I hated her. With a slow deep breath, I opened my eyes and stared at her for a long while. I knew something like this was going to happen, but I didn't know she would be the one to do it. Or that she'd do it like that. At least I'm awake, which was probably the point of the water, as she seemed to have learned that I will fight back and I will draw blood. I don't need to win. Just piss her off. Snapping my fingers, the dragon disappeared from the net and a summoning circle glowed before me, but with no dragon in sight. Falling face first into the net suspending between them, without a worry for the dragon I knew to be there. You know, everyone else at least screamed, she sighed. Doubt, I grunted, I wasn't the only one that knew it was coming after all. Boot camp, that is. The absolute best way to end the first trimester. They didn't remove me from the net while they marched out of my room, half of Ari's questions being answered, but she seemed just about as aware as I was. Which wouldn't be shocking, as I would not be all right, had they not told the foreign girl, who's part of a reclusive clan that is very wary around others, of the perfectly safe kidnapping. Alex was a little confused, but took our calm reactions as a safety signal, and just followed after the one escorting him with a yawn and a rub of the eyes. They weren't the only ones to follow too, the nearly silent footsteps of my clawless beast, who was thankfully keeping its hatred of others in check, being drowned out by the countless that had apparently been sent to my room. It was actually quite the confidence booster to find they thought they needed 8 different trained professionals to deal with little old me. Though had that pepper spray done anything but distracted, I'm sure they wouldn't have sent nearly enough. I am not ashamed to say I don't want to ever know what would happen had it been capable of feeling pain. You're really not gonna struggle. Like at all. Not even a little. I was prepared to take you at your worth. She pouted like a child right next to my face, while I just gave her a deadpan stare, just so she would know how much of an idiot I felt she was. She just sighed, finding I was not going to give her any other reaction. Honestly though, kid, you're gonna wish you were in my team by the end of the day. Oh yes, emotional comfort. Because I care with all my being, no, with every atom in existence. Okay, you don't need to look at me like that, you're not going to see your favorite teacher for a whole week, and word of the wise, it's best to think you're really going to die here, you got the worst person. Glancing as Ari and Alex were swept off by two people, I took note. If being with your team means you're at risk, leave, you'll have a better chance alone than with a useless party. It doesn't matter that this is a team exercise. You talk way too much. She paused in her spew to give me a flat look which earned a lazy smirk in response. Remember the part where I am older than you and your teacher brat? I am still fully capable of screwing you over. This guy was called in because we didn't have enough hands, and even if we did, they wouldn't be qualified to deal with your whole freaks how thing you've got going on. Newbies don't know anything, wanna know what that means. I could tell him about you and your almost cute friend. Oh, fantastic, threats. I gave a dry response that earned a strange scoff sigh mixed to fall from her lips, all the while I cuddled into the relatively comfortable net. I got it, play like it's life and death, do whatever you have to survive, because you'll probably get rewarded for getting the teacher's approval, especially if it's some rando like you're describing. I yawned, closing my eyes. Annoyingly perspective, she mumbled, making me snicker and give an actual attempt to wake up. The icy morning air helping, as I was still soaked. Just annoying. One more tip, she glared, this isn't strictly a true magic exercise, it's a survival and resourceful one, use whatever you've got to. Don't be afraid to get down and dirty, desperate is best. Rolling onto my back, I looked at her and found she was looking at a piece of notebook paper. Well, and here I thought I was special. Rolling my eyes, I sighed and rubbed my face. Putting together the fact that everyone was given different tidbits, it didn't take much longer to figure out we were supposed to put our heads together. Okay, well, I'm keeping half of those to myself. Why are you leaving a trail of glass? She asked, glancing up from her clipboard. Looking at my hands, I found glass falling between the holes of the net. Too much mana, it happens sometimes. I waved her off while the transparent dragon ate every piece I happened to drop. Sure, the thing was easily bigger than a horse at this point, but I didn't know how big my party was going to be, and it couldn't fly with more than 3 people. Which was pushing it, so, logically, I'm going to make the beast bigger. Mind you, when we got to the large open field, I was not the only one with nothing more than their nightwear. I may have seen one person with slippers. With the sun hardly peeking over the horizon, students with nothing to protect their feet, no equipment in sight, they had us out here in wet grass freezing. Sadists as usual. Watching the indents in the grass while my dragon walked in front of me not even 10 feet from my Dean the Earth Elite, who glanced in its direction, only to narrow his eyes without stopping his announcement. Elites were good. It was annoying. Hey, no, bad, don't think like that. Rubbing my palm along my brow, I sighed, hugging myself as I shivered, my feet quickly growing numb, and most annoyingly, I was aware of a habit I had to break. I swear I have a death wish. Reminding myself of where I was and what was happening, I looked back to the indents in the frosty grass. It had to have had its side turned to me. I was probably just between its neck and shoulder. Glancing away, as names started being called and groups paired up, I listened carefully. Groups consisting of 3. With my name what it was and a lack of tack via the elite, my group was called last. Me being closest to the elite, leaving the 2 to come to me while I noted who they were. A barbarian and a fighter. 2 classic lead classes. Actually, 2 of the more common ones, or, well, 1. Barbarians weren't uncommon, but they weren't common either. Not the point. They are both very big and I'm patting myself on the back for feeding my dragon. You have 10 minutes to flee before your respected hunter will start hunting you, go. He called, with no other warning, everyone bolting. My group included. My legs rushed into action, the cold wet ground sending a jolt up my feet and slowing me down as I tried not to slip. The dragon appeared with a growl, my teammates faltering at the familiar being. Alex even turned to me to beg, but it was too late. Kicking off its wing, I twisted my body and threw myself onto its back as I had practiced countless times. Rearing onto its hind legs, Alex actually making an attempt to run while Adrian paused to watch his attempt, unsure himself as to whether this was a good idea, only for it to roar and his body to turn. An attempt to follow after Alex quickly made. Many others halted their escape to see what just gave such a blood-curdling sound, some even reeling back in shock, others falling. It didn't take a second for its claws to form and latch onto the two that shouted their complaints, but it simply banked hard, going straight up with no regard to the protests. 10 minutes wouldn't typically get you far in unknown terrain, but I was on dragon back, and we both knew this forest quite well. As if I was going to get caught. I couldn't afford that, not after all the failing marks I've been racking up. I'd rather die. Chapter 30 Vince, Rogue Teacher Dude, POV, the glass lead under your care is a very peculiar girl. We actually call you here because of this. Despite what you think, that girl's magic isn't weak. Trust me, she knows how to use so well that it wouldn't take much more than a thought for it to be deadly. She's got a shocking amount of tricks up her sleeves, and she's quick-witted, and yeah, she doesn't really act like it often, but she's definitely a rogue. She doesn't like to put in more effort than she has to and absolutely sucks at anything that requires physical exertion, but she gets insanely intense when it comes to tests, and I doubt being around people will suddenly change that. Oh, and don't wake her up. She's the worst when you wake her up. I hadn't thought much of it when she had originally said that. She's always been one to mess with others, and putting me on guard against a glass mage would definitely give her something to laugh about for the next century. But it didn't take me more than a day to see her. Not to mention the fact she didn't hide that she knew I saw her. And it continued. Weird little things that wouldn't mean much alone, but added up fast. Then that effortless escape from a crowded corridor. Anything from her subtle use of blood magic to her quick notice of anyone looking her way. I had expected an utter monster, and that's what I got in her practical classes. It didn't take more than a few peeks to find her miraculously keeping up and even answering questions. Her paper tests the top of her class with undeniable detail. She pays attention and even goes out of her way to know more. But the physical classes. I didn't have the highest expectations, having been warned of her abilities, but I seem to have developed some having seen her academic skill and resourcefulness. It had been disappointing to find that she struggled so heavily to maintain mediocrity. I will attempt that she was fast and her eyes always seemed to follow others exceptionally well, but she lacked the skill and strength to stand against both leads and professionals. Had she had stamina, she would fare far better, but that too was lacking. If she could withstand the unreasonable horror I've found in these walls, she would be a devastating weapon. And when I say if she could withstand, I don't mean mentally. I've seen her go to the medical wing so many times, I'm genuinely shocked she's still able to stand, let alone walk. Now, though lacking physical skill, she was still exceptionally difficult to read, and was so capable, she was taking a third-year extracurricular in her free time. From what I hear, she's also knowledgeable in multiple languages, which makes it even harder to understand her. Plus I've seen many deals of some sort going on between her and multiple members of the council. With those she keeps around, it's a wonder that I try. A newly discovered clan. That beastly bastard of an elf. An orc marquis's son. It's horribly inconsistent, and her behavior changes around each of them, a neutral falling when around more than one. I expected a quick, but well thought out plan and maybe a few traps. Yet here I am, watching her throw herself over the back of a nearly clear dragon, with expert precision, like it did not just appear out of thin air. The most interesting part. Edward watched indifferently. Like he knew. locking its claws around her teammates, which, interestingly enough, were 2 of her 3 companions. It shot straight up with a harsh twirl, the girl upon it laughing wildly and the boys in the claws shouting just as loudly. Why was I not told that she had a dragon? I asked, watching its wings catch the light, as it flew deep into the forest with my students, deep enough that I wasn't going to be able to catch up until at least tomorrow, that is, under the assumption that she'll come down at any point. I feel as if that's cheating. That is cheating, yes. No, it is not. Magic is allowed and encouraged for this exercise. I had sent Isabel to warn you of her oddities. You should have been prepared for everything. Because anyone really, would be prepared for a dragon. I'm confident that you were anything but prepared when you first saw it. You elites would flip the moment something like that happened. Yes, indeed, I should have been ready to use the dragon protocol, because dragons aren't at all creatures that need a small army, and at least 2 elites to kill. He gave the usual stare down upon my sarcasm, and I proceeded to do what I do best. Ignore it, him really. He was always nitpicking about anything remotely rude, but being a man, who only knew such things, that was understandable. I mean, if you're such a massive buzzkill, no one's willingly going to like you. Vince, we've given you, and only you, both access and permission to use very expensive potions. Or yes, the best weapon we currently hold against the Empire. And here I had assumed I was expected to get used to using them, not use against a dragon, and a student that seems to control it. It's best that you be careful with these. They are rather easy to break unintentionally, and the last to do so blew up an entire wing in my academy. He deadpanned, ignoring me, and lifting the case that I easily guessed the contents of. Oh yes, don't at all explain this extremely dangerous weapon, and send me after your students. A truly brilliant idea that one is. What's the worst I could do? Kill them. Set fire to your oh so precious forest. The school maybe. Yep, nothing to worry about. Nothing at all. And you wonder why the supports despise you leads. Shaking my head lightly, I took the case with no further explanation, knowing just how unwilling leads were to give them. Do as they say when they say, that's all the information you need. As cocky as one could get. With a roll of my eyes, I looked at the fine but thick suitcase and glanced at the man that thinks himself a king before opening it. Blinking at the skillfully placed orbs, I ran my fingers over the glass racks they were quite literally attached to. This was something only a glass mage could do. I found my gaze drifting back to the man talking with the only glass mage I had ever seen within his vicinity other than a strange student. She chatted as she always did, unusually comfortable with the man. They've always gotten along, even long before they had become elites. They have yet to tell anyone which potions master had been the one to create such a devastating potion. Which was abnormal in its own right, but this meant it was either a glass mage or someone working with one. Looking back at the many orbs, I easily broke the thin line of glass attaching the orb to the top frame, and carefully turned it in between my fingers. Staring at the stamp-like protrusion, I had no plan of finding. I couldn't help the disbelieving laugh. The side of a dragon's head placed over 2 thin potion bottles in an X formation. Whoever did such a thing sure has a lot of guts. A stomach stronger than steel, really. If it really was the person that came to mind, then I'd be less than shocked to find such a thing. But if it was literally anyone else, I'm quite amazed they are still breathing. Dragons were a sign of the violent, the brutal. They tore into anything slightly self-aware. To blatantly state you're willing to do the same. Let alone do so to the council. Stars, the stomach on that one. Potions were mostly useless at war until recently, and damn, did these shake the very foundation of the battlefield, but finding out their unnamed creator was so godforsakenly gutsy. It was nearly a paradox. They want to stand out, but stay anonymous. Now I have to find out just who made them, but until then, I've got some pesky little brats to catch. Chapter 31 Lilith POV. Stop it! I rolled my eyes at the dragon that was growling at the two it knew, who were trying to collect themselves after my kidnapping. Running my finger along the bark of the familiar tree, I hummed as I found the edge and ripped it off. Pulling out my bag, I opened it. Put these on or freeze to death, your call really, I said, tossing both clothes and shoes at the pair without so much as a glance. Pulling my shirt over my head, I pulled on my underlayer before stacking the tight, but flexible fabric. Vixen had been more than irritated when I had given her another call, and gave me anything I could ever bother to ask her for with a threat in the instance I called again. Stuffing my sleepwear into the bag, I turned around to find Alex's hand in Adrian's hair, forcing his head down. Looking between them, I raised a brow, while Alex just gave an innocent smile, and Adrian mumbled one thing or another. All right, well, we need a plan. I'm confident he'll be here by the end of tomorrow, and I can't just keep flying us around. I'm surprised it even got us this far, all things considering. I mumbled the last part to myself while I leaned back against the tree, the both of them finally changing. Glancing at the dragon who sat next to me, its tail wrapping around both me and the tree I was leaning on, I hummed to myself. It didn't really need its wings at this point. They were just extra baggage. Sure, they may come in handy for an emergency escape, but it wasn't all that much effort to summon new ones. Without leaving the tree, I took hold of the wing next to me and gave it a jerk, the other falling just as fast as both grew murky before shattering effortlessly against the ground. Patting its back, I sighed when spines grew, its need to show hostility abnormal. Beasley's gotten bigger, Adrian said, clearing his throat and brushing off his new outfit. He's got good magic control and is shockingly good with people, but that's really all he's got going for him. He's already been placed in the group most likely to get discharged into another school. Regardless of whether he stays here or not, he will definitely have connections in the future. You're making that face you make when evaluating things, Alex stated with a pointed, flat look. Alex. He was easily one of the high-ranking nobles within the school, his father being a marquis, but beyond social standing, he was overall a well-rounded soldier. His studies could be a bit better, but it wasn't as if he was falling behind, that and the fact he couldn't pull a punch to save his life. He was at the top of year one in terms of ability, and with very little effort at that. A natural, if you will. He's popular, practically famous, but prefers to stick around his close friends, and like all orcs, he's got top-notch manners. He'll go far both on and off the battlefield. Hey, remember? People are not things, so. He waved his hand, telling me to finish for him. Don't treat them like things, I finished with narrowed eyes, and I wasn't even doing anything, so you can't say I was treating you like a. I 100% can, because even thinking about a person as if they are an object counts. Pursing my lips, I didn't comment. I mean, if you want to treat me like an object, I'm down, Adrian smirked, only to get a firm smack upside the head. While I raised my brows at the two. What did we talk about? Self-respect, he grumbled, rubbing the back of his head. Giving Adrian an understanding nod, who rolled his eyes in response, I also gave Alex a disapproving head shake, who narrowed his eyes at me. Why did I get stuck with the two insane ones? That's my question. I could have had Ari, would kick ass, but no, I got you too, he scoffed, crossing his arms and gaining two passive waves of the hand. Boring, we called together. Ari and him on the same team. They'd just hide the whole time. There was no fun in that. Like, come on, they were too smart to actively try to fight professionals, they'd commit to camouflage, and just not move for a week. They wouldn't even bother to run. So, boring. Anyway, we need to start keeping tabs on the other teams, so, Adrian, if you would. I put my hands on my hips and stared at him, looking away from the dragon's mouth, which was full of sharp and bared teeth. He squinted at me with distaste, his hand still on my dragon's face. The dragon, who was only being hostile to him. Why do we have to keep tabs on the other teams? Oh, he wanted to do nothing. I see. You honestly think a team exercise would be just your team? I narrowed my eyes at the lazy freckled dro, who pulled an unhappy smile at my tone. If you work with the other teams you have more professors after you, which, I would guess, means more points. The more people you help the more professors are after you. So, let's say, we help every team, how many professors are gonna chase us, huh? It's 408, but ease up on the attitude. Alex sighed, crossing his arms. Glancing at the barbarian, who was also growing irritable, I cleared my throat, straightened my back, and nodded. That's right, because everyone was split into groups of 3 and there are a total of 1,224 of us first years. I know how math works. I didn't stop, but did glance at Adrian's raised brow as he sat on a log. My attitude being matched apparently. And they called an extra help to avoid making the parties too big, which I heard had quite the problem last year. Leads and all that. Making it even easier for us to help other teams. With that said, it isn't reasonable for us to team up with everyone in the next week, but we could easily help 50 or so teams, giving us the opportunity to make 10 times the amount of points as the others, under the assumption I'm correct. If I'm not, and they're going with a smaller group to slowly build teamwork and avoid horrible power struggles, then we'd simply be earning favors and support for later. Either way, it's a win-win. We can always break off a bad deal if they start to drag us down. I explained my thinking to the two, glancing between them and fixing myself every once in a while at the faces they made. If you are right, that makes it harder on us, more professors, more problems, Adrian hummed, glancing at Alex, who met his gaze. Ignoring the using people part, of course, he offered the larger boy an almost mocking smile, making him narrow his eyes and making me look between the two rapidly, as suddenly the tension was high. This is a test, Adrian, he pressed, staring down at Adrian, who pulled a pleasant smile in a second. Fine, but we talk before we cut people off, we decide these things together, all right. He looked at me for that one like I was the one most likely to cause the problems. Makes sense, the actual delinquent agreed, also looking at me. Narrowing my eyes, I looked between them and crossed my arms. Obviously, Tilda, they mocked, Adrian rolling his eyes and Alex shaking his head. If you're ready for more magic, more adventure, and more of Lilith's story, then subscribe to our channel and embark on your magical journey. Don't forget to hit that bell so you don't miss any updates.